27th of May 2026. This is a brand new edition of Newsfirst Primetime News coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. Bringing you tonight's bulletin for the Newsfirst team. I am Jaimal Ratnayaka.
And I'm Umeta Bekon. Let's start off with a look at your headlines for tonight.
The headlines on Newsfirst.
President announces re-establishment of disciplinary tribunal to safeguard Sangha integrity. Compensation granted to farmers affected by crop damage from Matara salinity barrier.
දෙම මම දන්නවා මේ දවස්වල මේ ආර්ථිකය වැටිලා එහෙනවනේ දෙන්න. දාලා යන්න එහෙමත් ඒගොල්ලෝගේ උපදෙස් ගන්න මේ වට්ටපුව අය හොඳේ. මේ වගේ අර්බුදයකදී මේක පාලනය කරන විදිහ ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවලු. දන්නේ කොහොමද දන්නවද? පැනලා ගිහිල්ලා හැංගෙන්න. මේ තිබුණු ආර්ථිකය අපි සැලකිය යුතු හොඳ වර්ධනයකට ගෙනල්ලා.
IMF Executive Board meets today to decide on Sri Lanka's combined review. Easter attack case against Hemasri Fernando and Pojit Jasundara to resume on June 12. Trump gathers cabinet as he looks to seal Iran deal to end the war.
On to your top story for tonight. President Anukumara Dissanayake delivered an extensive clarification on Sri Lanka's economic situation during an event in Matara today.
The president emphasized that steps are currently being taken to build a strong economy.
දෙම මම දන්නවා මේ දවස්වල මේ ආර්ථිකය වැටිලා
I know these days people are hearing that the economy is collapsing. Some even say to abandon everything. They suggest taking advice from those who actually caused this collapse. And how do they claim they know how to handle crises? By running away and hiding. We have taken the economy we inherited and brought it to a level of significant growth. If you look at Treasury revenue, in 2025 it stood at 16.7% of GDP. That is the highest level in 30 years. That is important. For the first time in 3 decades, we are generating such a large volume of revenue. That means money is flowing into the Treasury. In 2022 and 2023, there was no money in the Treasury. There was only an overdraft, a bank liability of around 800 billion rupees. What have we done now? At one point, we had nearly 1 trillion rupees in treasury reserves. It has slightly reduced now due to spending on disasters. But having such reserves at one time is significant. The second factor is the gap between revenue and expenditure, the budget deficit. Yes, our expenditure still exceeds revenue, but we are gradually reducing that gap. The optimal level is below 5%. Since 1957, every finance minister has promised to bring it below 5%, but it never happened. In some years, it went up to 10.8% or 8.8%. However, for the first time since 1957, we have brought the deficit down to 2.3%, the lowest ever recorded. That is a major achievement. Third, our current account. Every year, dollars come in and dollars go out. But historically, more has gone out than come in. Only 3 years ever recorded a surplus. And even then, it was around $300 to $350 million. Last year, we recorded a current account surplus of $1.7 billion, the highest in Sri Lanka's history. That is a key economic indicator. Another important measure is the primary balance. This is government revenue minus expenditure, excluding debt interest payments. The IMF required us to maintain a surplus of 2.3%, but last year we achieved a surplus of 5.4%, more than double the target. All these indicators show that we have brought the economy to a stable level. However, we have faced significant challenges. One was the decision by the United States under President Donald Trump to impose higher tariffs on imports based on its economic policy. Many predicted that our economy would collapse, but we engaged in successful discussions with the United States, and those talks are continuing. We are working to protect our export markets and will not allow them to collapse. Another major challenge was the Ditwa cyclone. According to reports by the World Bank, the largest disaster in living memory was the tsunami. But in terms of economic impact, Ditwa has had a great effect. It impacted around 3% of GDP and caused damages exceeding $3 billion. The vast land area was flooded and over 6,000 houses were completely destroyed. We allocated 500 billion rupees to address its impact. To put this into perspective, the Rambukkana Galagedara Expressway costs around 120 billion rupees. and the Kurunagala-Dambulla Expressway about 150 billion. But the cost of Ditwa alone is 500 billion. That gives you an idea of the scale. Many believed economic growth in the final quarter would collapse. Who wants to bring down this government? It is not the people of this country. It is those who are corrupt, thieves and criminals. Remember that. This government cannot be shaken for decades. And more importantly, those who are corrupt and fraudulent will be brought to justice. That is why there is unrest. Elections are still far away, yet there is constant agitation. Why? Because they know their cases will be heard in courts. They want to create chaos, but we will not panic.
The president made these remarks while attending a compensation distribution program for farmers affected by flooding in the Nilwala River Basin between 2019 and 2022. The event was held this morning at the Malimbada Pradesh Sabha Auditorium, where affected farmers received financial assistance.
The IMF Executive Board will meet today to decide on Sri Lanka's combined reviews and, if approved, will unlock $700 million in funding for the island.
The International Monetary Fund has fixed today, the 27th May 2026, for its Executive Board to decide on the 5th and 6th reviews of Sri Lanka's Extended Fund Facility Program. This is a move that could unlock roughly $700 million in much-needed financing. If the board approves both reviews, Sri Lanka will become eligible to draw the 6th and 7th tranches under the IMF arrangement. Yesterday, Sri Lanka's Central Bank Governor Dr. P. Nandalal Weerasinghe asserted that the country remains in compliance with key International Monetary Fund program conditions, particularly on cost-reflective fuel pricing, amid growing public concern over pricing policies and subsidy practices. Earlier this month, Julie Kozak, director of the IMF Communications Department, recently said that several prior actions had to be completed before the program could be presented to the board. These included restoring cost recovery pricing for electricity and fuel, while also ensuring protection for vulnerable groups, as well as completing the financing assurances review.
The State Vesak Festival commenced this afternoon at the historic Midalavala Rajamaha Viharaya in Tiyagoda in Mathura under the patronage of President Anura Kumara Disanayake.
The opening ceremony of Sri Lanka's 2570th Vesak commemorations, themed Dakshina Prabha, was attended by members of the Mahasangha representing the three Nikayas, as well as foreign diplomats and dignitaries, reflecting both the religious and international importance of the occasion.
වර්තමාන සම්බුද්ධ ශාසනය ඇති වුණේ 1700 ගණන් වල. ඒ වන විට මෙකම උපසම්පදා භික්ෂුන් වහන්සේ නමක්වත් නැහැ. ඒ වගේම අධ්‍යාපනය පිළිබඳ කිසිම දැනුගත් කෙනෙක් හිටියේ නැහැ. අන්ත පරිහානියටපත් වෙලා. ඒ වෙලාවේ රජවරු දෙන්නෙකුට කරුණු කාරණා කියලා කීර්ති රාජසිංහ රජතුමන්ගේ උපකාර ලබාගෙන තායිලන්තයට දූතයන් යවලා පරම ධාර්මික රජතුමාගේ අනුග්‍රහයෙන් සංඝරාජ හාමුදුරුවෝ හිම සාකච්ඡා කරලා උපාලි හාමුදුරුවෝ පිරිස වඩම්මවලා 1753 ජූලි මාසයේ 15 වෙනිදා තමයි වර්තමාන සම්බුද්ධ ශාසනය ආරම්භ කළේ.
ආත්මාර්ථය අනුව කටයුතු කළොත් ඒ වගේම පරහිතකාමීත්වයෙන් ඈත් වුණොත් කවදාවත් රටක් ජාතියක් ඉදිරියට යන්නේ සංස්කෘතික ප්‍රවර්ධනයක් ඇති වෙන්නේ ආගමික සංහිඳියාවක් ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
ධර්මයේ විකෘති කරන පිරිසක් සිවුරු පෙරවගෙන ඉන්නවා. විනය විනාශ කරන පිරිසක් සිවුරු පෙරවගෙන ඉන්නවා. බෞද්ධ දේපල අවභාවිතා කරන පිරිසක් සිවුරු පෙරවාගෙන ඉන්නවා. වැටත් නියරත් දෙකම ගොයන් කන විට ගොවියාට සිදු වෙනවා වඩාත් බුද්ධිමත් තීරණ ගන්න. මේ දෙයට සක්‍රීයව දායක විය යුතුයි. මහා පරාක්‍රම බාහු රජතුමා ඒ යුතුයකම කළා. වෝහාරතිස්ස රජුරෝ ඒ යුතුයකම කළා. විජයබාහු රජුරෝ ඒ යුතුයකම කළා. අපි දන්නවා අශෝක මහ රජතුමා ඒ යුතුයකම කළා. අනුර කුමාර දිසානායක ජනාධිපතිතුමනි ඔබතුමාට ඒ වගකීම වර්තමානයේ පැවරෙනවා.
In conjunction with the State Vesak Festival, a commemorative stamp was also issued during the ceremony.
නාරාමය විහාරස්ථානයේ බිතුසිතුවමක් ආශ්‍රයෙන් රුපියල් 70ක් වටිනා සමරු මුද්‍රයක්.
Following the formalities, temple assistance grants and Puja Bhumi Sannas Patra documents were presented by the President.
නස්පත්‍රයේ පිරිනැමෙනවා ඇති. ගරු විහාරාධිපති පූජ්‍ය උළුවිටිකේ බෝධිසිංහ ස්වාමින් වහන්සේ වෙනුවෙන් ගල්ල මහා කපින සීමා මාලිකේ විහාරාධිපති පූජ්‍ය පිටවත්තේ සිරිසුන්න
විහාර දේවාලගම් පනත එහි 41 සහ 42 වගන්තිය සංශෝධනය කරන්න.
Sections 41 and 42 of the Vihara Devalagam Act will be amended to award power to the Dhamma Tribunal to take necessary disciplinary action on monks. This is in the final stage. We will expedite the necessary laws as soon as possible. Economic prosperity can only be achieved when it is accompanied by a morally grounded society. Economic revival and spiritual revival must move together. That is why it is my expectation and the expectation of my government that this era will be remembered in history as a time of religious awakening in Sri Lanka. This is not simply about ritual. It is about achieving a deep spiritual and economic transformation. That is why we are undertaking a significant amount of work in this regard. In particular, we have planned to host the World Buddhist Conference in Sri Lanka this November. Buddhism has shaped our society and our civilization. It is impossible to imagine building a Sri Lankan identity without it. The decline among disciplined monks is something that causes us deep pain. I say this with a sense of sorrow. Recently, when 21 monks were arrested in connection with narcotics, I held discussions with the representatives of the three Nikayas. They suggested that those involved should first be derobed before being produced before courts. The question is, how can we present monks before courts in that manner? All representatives agreed on this approach, that they should be derobed first, and if proven innocent, they would be reordained. However, legal provisions are based on law, not the Dhamma, and this could not be implemented. Any wrongdoing committed in the name of the Dhamma causes us great anguish. We are a people nurtured by our temple. When the chief monk of our village walked to the lake for his evening bath, we would kneel and pay respect on the gravel road. We are a people shaped by that spirituality. That is why I know, not just for myself, but for all Buddhists in this country, this is a time of deep concern and reflection.
බෞද්ධ ජනතාව අපි හැම දෙනාම ඊටම සිත් උලින් ඉන්න වෙලාව බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙන මේ සිදුවෙන සිදුවීම.
The Special Presidential Commission appointed to investigate coal procurement transactions has received a total of 28 complaints so far. The process of recording statements in relation to these complaints is scheduled to commence from next week.
The Special Presidential Commission appointed to investigate the coal procurement stated that statements will continue to be recorded from officials of institutions involved in the coal transactions. Accordingly, statements will be obtained from officials of the Lanka Coal Company Private Limited, the Lakvijaya Power Plant as well as the Ministry of Energy. Evidence recording into the coal transactions are also expected to begin shortly. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Committee on Public Enterprises, Member of Parliament Dr. Nishantha Samaravira stated that the report of the COPE investigation into the coal transactions will be presented to Parliament next month. The COPE chairman said that several parties, including officials of the Lanka Coal Company Private Limited and administrative officials of the Lakvijaya Power Plant, were summoned before the committee during the course of the investigation into the coal transactions. He further stated that several audit reports issued in this regard were also used as the basis for the inquiry. He added that any aspects identified for further investigation will be referred to the Criminal Investigation Department as well as the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption. Meanwhile, the National People's Power stated that despite allegations raised by the opposition regarding a coal-related fraud, no formal complaints have been submitted to the Commission.
පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ මයික් පැලුවා. එල්ලියේ මාධ්‍ය සාකච්ඡා දහස් ගණන් තිබ්බා. 10 15 බෝඩ් අරගෙන නැටුවා. පාර්ලිමේන්තුව වටරවම හිටියා. දැන් මේ විපක්ෂයේ ගල්ලංගුරු අල්ලලා ගල්ලංගුරු උදෙත් කෑවේ ගල්ලංගුරු දවල්ටත් කාලා මේ ඩිනර් එකටත් ගත්තේ ගල්ලංගුරු පහුගිය මාසේ. ඒ දඟලපු විපක්ෂයේ කොහෙද ගිහිල්ලා දැන් මේ පැමිණිලි කළේ?
A discussion on the long-delayed provincial council election was held in Colombo with the participation of general secretaries representing major political parties. The dialogue was organized by the People's Action for Free and Fair Elections, or PAFRO.
We cannot simply brush this issue aside. Just a few days ago, JVP General Secretary Tilvin Silva said in Jaffna that provincial council elections cannot be held this year due to expenditures related to disasters and other reasons. A similar statement was previously made by Ranil Wickremesinghe when he was president, and we opposed it. That is a separate matter. However, this is a responsibility. We cannot evade that responsibility easily. When the National People's Power formed the government, we clearly stated in our policy declaration that the postponed local government and provincial council elections would be held within 1 year. Accordingly, we conducted the local government elections within that time frame. We also intended to hold discussions and make arrangements for the provincial council elections early this year. However, unfortunately, we had to face the Ditwa cyclone at the end of 2025, and much of the early part of this year was spent addressing that crisis. As a result, we were unable to proceed with the provincial council election. At present, a parliamentary select committee has been appointed for this purpose. As a government, we are ready to move forward with provincial council elections based on the decision of that committee. I also raised the statement made by Tilvin Silva with him directly. Our position remains that we are prepared to proceed with elections once the committee decision is finalized. Funds have already been allocated in both the previous and current budgets for this purpose. As a party, our position is that this has already been delayed enough. Therefore, at the very least, the next election should be conducted under the previous system, and thereafter time can be taken to introduce a new system. Even if discussions are held with Tilvin Silva, this matter cannot be resolved without action. As a party, we are in agreement on that point. If there was a genuine intent, there would be no need to keep dragging this matter. We have already held 4 meetings and sought views from the Attorney General's department. A simple amendment has been proposed suggesting that this matter be handled through a private member's bill. There are only 2 ways to conduct these provincial council elections. As explained by the Deputy Solicitor General, one option is the proposal I have presented as a private member's bill. Alternatively, with a single sentence, Parliament can repeal the 2017 Provincial Council's Elections Act. If such a simple amendment is brought, there is no need for any complex process. We can revert to the 1987-88 system and conduct the election under that framework. During the 52-day government, the cabinet had approved a return to the old system. Later, when I was the chairman of the Election Commission, former President Maithripala Sirasena sought a Supreme Court ruling on this matter. He stated verbally that only Parliament has the authority to resolve this issue. That is why we have consistently said that this is like a Gordian knot. It cannot be untied easily. Only Parliament has the power to cut through it. Many now argue that the proportional representation system is flawed, but what we saw in the local government elections was primarily due to issues within the specific law, not the system itself. That is an important distinction.
We all know that this has been delayed and we too are responsible for that. There is no point in continuing discussions indefinitely. Looking at the history, the current committee structure is unnecessary. We should move forward by incorporating women's and youth representation and conduct the election under the existing system. That is our position.
Opposition political parties are currently engaged in discussions over party crossovers as tensions continue to build around shifting political loyalties. The Sri Lanka Podu Jana Perumuna today once again responded to the presence of a Samagi Jana Balawegaya district organizer who had attended a recent SLPP rally in Panadura.
Amila, who contested from Kaluthara and secured around 21,000 votes, came to us and said, "We are ready to stand with Namal Rajapaksa. I now formally entrust Amila to our leader." At this moment, what we wanted was to give an opportunity to someone who was willing to come forward and to recognize that person. Everything that happened was based on the information provided to us by that young individual. There was a degree of consistency in that information. We had no intention whatsoever to harass or cause inconvenience to anyone. If one has a conscience, it is clear that we did not attempt to use this to criticize or attack any political movement. However, based on the information we received, there appears to have been an error in certain details. We had no objective of causing discomfort to anyone. If any party has been inconvenienced or even slightly affected, we express our regret.
The Colombo Permanent High Court Trial at Bar ordered that the case filed against former Defence Secretary Hemasri Fernando and former Inspector General of Police Pujit Jayasundara be recalled on the 12th of June. The matter was taken up before a 3-judge bench comprising Priyantha Liyanage, Viraj Veerasurya and Tilakaratna Bandara. The case has been filed against the 2 former top security officials on several charges, including criminal negligence and dereliction of duty over their alleged failure to act on prior intelligence warnings about the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks.
Both accused, former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando and former IGP Pujit Jayasundara, were present in court during today's proceedings. After considering the submissions made, the bench fixed the 12th of June as the date to continue the case and to proceed with further arguments. The case filed by the Attorney General alleges that the two top officials failed in their duty to act on prior intelligence warnings about the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks, thereby committing criminal negligence and dereliction of duty. The charges are linked to their alleged inaction despite receiving information that an attack was imminent. The High Court trial at bar had previously acquitted both defendants on the 18th of February in 2022 after the prosecution's evidence was examined without calling for their defense. However, the Attorney General challenged that decision before the Supreme Court, arguing that it was legally flawed. The Supreme Court subsequently ruled that the High Court should have called for the defense before acquitting the accused, stating that the earlier decision was contrary to legal procedure. Following that ruling, the case was ordered to be retried.
Two children from the same family have died in a fire that broke out in a room of a hotel in Batticaloa town.
Police say that the deceased were a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy from Pelgahatanna in Passara Badulla. Police added the children's father had said the family had travelled to Batticaloa to obtain medical treatment for his wife. After admitting the wife to the Batticaloa hospital, the father and the two children had checked into a local hotel. The fire had broken out this evening when the father had briefly gone to the ground floor, leaving the children locked inside the room. Police suspect that the children may have operated a lighter inside the room, causing the bed in the room to catch fire. Both children are believed to have died from smoke inhalation. The Batticaloa police are conducting further investigations.
Weather first.
Rainfall continues to affect several parts of Sri Lanka as the southwest monsoon has now established itself across the island.
Let's take a closer look at the weather outlook for the coming days. Here is Hashini Patrina with the latest update. Hashini.
Thank you, Momitra and Jaimal. Now taking a look at the latest weather update that's coming directly from the Department of Meteorology. With the southwest monsoon now firmly established over the country, the prevailing rainy conditions in the southwestern parts of the island are expected to continue. Now, according to the Department of Meteorology, periodic showers or thunder showers are likely in the western Sabragamur as well as the northwestern provinces, as well as in the districts of Gaul, Mathura, Kandy and Nuwara Elia. Now, meanwhile, a few places in the Uva province and in the districts of Ampara and Batticaloa are also experiencing showers or thunder showers. And as always, the Department of Meteorology has urged the public to take necessary precautions to minimize possible damages caused by temporary strong winds and lightning associated with thunder showers.
Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath commenced his official visit to New Zealand today and was given a historic Maori welcome.
Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Vijitha Herath has become the first Sri Lankan Foreign Minister to receive the traditional Maori Pohiri welcome at New Zealand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade as he commenced his official visit to the country. Describing the moment as a deep honour, Minister Herath highlighted the significance of the ceremonial welcome, which reflects New Zealand's rich indigenous heritage and is reserved for distinguished guests, symbolising respect and partnership. During his visit, the Foreign Minister held high-level bilateral discussions with New Zealand's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Right Honourable Winston Peters. At the meeting, Herath expressed appreciation for the invitation extended to him and his delegation, noting the warm hospitality extended by the New Zealand government. The two ministers engaged in wide-ranging and constructive discussions covering key areas of cooperation, including political relations, trade, sports, governance, and the role of the Sri Lankan community in New Zealand. They also exchanged views on evolving global and regional developments and assessed their implications for both nations, underscoring the importance of collaboration in an increasingly complex international landscape. In addition to diplomatic engagements, Minister Herath also met with New Zealand's Minister of Sport and Recreation, Mark Mitchell, where discussions focused on strengthening cooperation in sports. Particular attention was given to cricket and rugby, two sports that hold deep cultural significance in both countries, as well as opportunities for training and development for Sri Lankan athletes. The discussions also touched on an upcoming milestone in bilateral sporting history, as Sri Lanka and New Zealand prepare to commemorate 100 years of cricketing ties in 2027. Plans for special events to mark the centenary were explored, highlighting sport as a powerful bridge connecting the two nations. Sri Lanka's Defence Secretary, retired Air Vice Marshal Sampath Thurkonta, held high-level discussions with Russia's Deputy Defence Minister Vasily Osmakov in Moscow on 26th of May as part of his official visit to the Russian Federation. The meeting took place on the sidelines of the Defence Secretary's participation in the first International Forum on Security and the annual meeting of High Representatives for Security Issues, which is being held in Moscow from 26th to the 29th of May. The gathering has brought together global security leaders to deliberate on emerging threats and evolving geopolitical dynamics. During the discussions, both parties engaged in cordial and constructive dialogue, exchanging views on pressing regional and global security challenges.
The launch of the Budumaga religious book, published by Upali newspapers, took place yesterday. The book was launched at the Gangaramya temple in Colombo.
The chairperson of Upali Group of Companies, Lakmini Ratwata Velgama, Group Managing Director Nimal Velgama, Brand Director Karishma Velgama, and the author of Budumaga, Professor Pranita Besundar, among others, attended the launch. The third edition of Budumaga, which was first printed in 1990, was presented to the chief incumbent of the Gangaramya Temple, Venerable Dr. Kirindayasaji Thera. This was held in conjunction with the Sri Buddha Varsha 2570 Thrice Blessed Day. This book includes more than 60 murals from ancient temples and consists of chapters on the illustrated life of the Buddha and the history of the Sasana and Buddhism.
In an era when we did not have a proper book to teach the life of the Buddha, the late Sita Rohini Ellawala Ratwatta, who acted as a noble philanthropist, conceived an idea. In memory of the late Upali Vijayawardena, who was a distinguished entrepreneur born in this country who took our identity to the world, she wished to print a book based on the life of Buddha, dedicated to his name. Thus, that book was printed and published for the very first time for the Vesak Full Moon Poya Day in 1990. Through a highly respected editorial board of clergy and laity in this country, making it a very meaningful, pleasing and beautiful book. After that, it was reprinted in 2008. Today, the third edition is launched by the granddaughter of that family. This has been done in a manner that is second to none compared to that original first edition.
A grant contract for a demining project under the scheme of Grant Assistance for Grassroots Human Security Projects was signed by the Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, Akio Izomata, today.
The government of Japan has provided $1,343,202 approximately 400 million rupees, to support humanitarian demining activities in the northern and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka. Speaking at the ceremony, Ambassador of Japan to Sri Lanka, Kyo Isumata, stated that Japan has also decided to fund a project worth $1.6 million for grant assistance through the UNDP, which is aimed at capacity building, especially targeting female deminers and operational enhancement of ongoing demining activities.
Grant assistance signed today is provided under Japan's scheme of grant assistance for grassroots human security projects called GGP. As a steadfast partner in Sri Lanka's post-conflict recovery and reconciliation efforts, Japan has so far extended $49 million for various demining projects in Sri Lanka since 2002, even before the end of the Civil War. Today's signing is another testament to Japan's commitment to continued assistance to the people of Sri Lanka, especially to those in the conflict-affected areas. I would also like to add that this past March, Japan has also decided to fund a project worth $1.60 million for grant assistance through the UNDP, which is aimed at capacity building, especially targeting female deminers, and operational enhancement of ongoing demining activities. Adding all these, the government of Japan is committing approximately $3 million for demining in Sri Lanka within the year 2026.
Under this new project, almost 400,000 square meters of land is expected to be made mine-free, allowing more than 3,100 people to return to their land and approximately 22,000 people in the surrounding areas to expand their economic activities.
Amnesty International launched a new report at the BMICH today on the Malayalam Tamils in Sri Lanka. According to this report, the Malayalam Tamils working on private tea estates and small holdings in Sri Lanka are being subjected to abuses that meet many of the International Labour Organization's indicators of forced labour while being denied access to the country's strict labour protections. Amnesty International launched a report named Abandoned by the State, Trapped in Private Estates, Rights Abuses against Sri Lanka's Malayalam Tamil tea workers. The research, which documents the plight of workers in Sri Lanka's southern province, found that members of the marginalized Malayalam Tamil community suffered multiple and widespread forms of abuse, including intimidation and threats, physical violence and harassment, debt bondage, restriction on movement, and poor working and living conditions. The report found that in addition to its failure to address these labour abuses, the state is failing in its duty to ensure workers' rights to social security, unionisation and access to justice.
With this report, a recommendation or a call is to the government, because as the primary responsibility for the protection of the Malayalam Tamil workers lies with the government, and it's important that the state and the authorities take adequate and immediate measures to provide social protection to the Malayalam Tamil workers who have been excluded from the protection mechanisms, and the implementation of these protection mechanisms like labour inspections, extending the coverage for minimum wage to the Malayalam Tamil workers in the southern province.
The launch was followed by a panel discussion with key stakeholders to address severe labour rights abuses within the plantation sector, examining systematic failures, state responsibility and incentives for a meaningful way forward. Amnesty International says that as an ILO member and a party to its 44 of its conventions, as well as UN human rights treaties such as the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Sri Lanka is obliged to ensure that workers are protected from discrimination, labour and human rights abuses. The research also found significant failings in labour inspections and enforcement of employment standards at tea estates in the Mathura and Gaul districts.
US President Donald Trump is set to meet his top officials at a precarious moment for peace talks aimed at ending the war with Iran, days after insisting a deal is quote-unquote largely negotiated.
Now, as he prepares to huddle with his senior aides, Trump is projecting confidence he's closing in on a deal that will reopen the Strait of Hormuz and provide him with a credible argument that Iran's nuclear capability has been diminished enough to declare victory, winding down a conflict that's been politically unpopular. Now, to tell us more on these developments, let's turn to Martin Satyanesan. Martin?
Thank you, Mitra and Jamal. Let's bring you up to speed on the very latest. A new draft peace proposal says Iran would fully restore commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels within 30 days, while the United States would withdraw military forces from Iran's vicinity and lift a naval blockade. The IRGC Navy's deputy political chief, Mohammad Akbarzadeh, says renewed war with the United States is unlikely, but Iran stands ready to repel any attack. Iran's president says economic war with the US has become the main battleground, accusing Washington of trying to hurt Iranians' livelihoods.
Iran state broadcaster says it obtained a preliminary document outlining a framework for a potential memorandum of understanding with the United States. The framework includes the withdrawal of US forces from Iran's vicinity, while Iran would allow commercial transit through the Strait of Hormuz to return to pre-war levels within 30 days. However, US military vessels would not be covered under the draft arrangement for Hormuz, where ship traffic would be managed by Iran in coordination with Oman, according to the Iranian news report. It also stressed the framework is not yet final and Iran would not move forward without tangible verification. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian met members of the Tehran Chamber of Commerce, urging a boost to Iran's economy, especially its private sector, as the war goes on. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency quoted Pezeshkian as saying, quote-unquote, the main battleground today is the economic war. The president had noted that US and Israel have failed on the military front in the war and are now focusing on hurting Iran economically. Meanwhile, Iran's intelligence ministry says the enemy has been defeated on the battlefield and is now resorting to other means of warfare. The tactics include economic pressure, cyber attacks, weapon smuggling, assassination, and hostile media campaigns. In comments carried by the Fars news agency, the ministry warned Iranian authorities will strictly prosecute any espionage or separatist activity.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.